So now, let's begin to understand what we mean by the democratization of enlightenment. It's once we bring Eastern and Western enlightenment into a higher integral embrace, by disambiguating the confusion between separateness and uniqueness, and therefore integrating the best intuition, insight, and spiritual breakthrough understanding of both Eastern and Western enlightenment, we can begin to have a genuine conversation about the democratization of enlightenment. Because every human being is a unique self. Every human being is a true self. Every true self is unique. There is no true self in the manifest world which is not unique. Once we embrace uniqueness again as the expression of individuation, meaning the individuated expression of true self, the personal face of essence, that is you, that it's God's signature written all over you, right? Is God appearing in you as you, right? That's unique self. Right? Once we embrace that uniqueness, we've removed the counterintuitive sense of enlightenment, which creates an obstacle and stands between, right, the average human being who experiences their uniqueness and who can't understand an enlightenment teaching which tells them to reject their uniqueness. Right now we understand that the average intuition, that the normal intuition of the human being which embraces uniqueness is correct, and that the enlightenment teaching that tells the human being to leave their uniqueness behind because it conflates separateness and uniqueness is incorrect, at best partial. So we can begin to invite the democratization of enlightenment. And the democratization of enlightenment says, because you can, you must. Because it's possible, you should. Right? The democratization of enlightenment says that enlightenment is actually a genuine option for every human being. That every human being has the ability to clarify their egoic identity, to access an actual first-person taste, a first-person one taste, a first-person experience, that their ani, their small self I, using the Hebrew term, is part of ayin, is part of shunyata, is part of the seamless code of the universe. You can actually have that experience. You can point towards it, you can experience it, and then you can experience your full unique expression of that, your unique self, and feel that, wow, what calls me in the world is my unique self. And I can actually give up jealousy, and I can give up the contraction of trying to be like you, and I can give up hatred, because the only person I'm actually in genuine competition with in the world is me. And the only best I can be, and the only, ultimately stunningly beautiful I can be, is by being the best me that ever was, is, or will be, right? Which is my unique self, which is the higher expression of my individuality post-realization of true self. Right? I actually don't experience myself as small and contracted, and I'm trying to figure out my typology to figure out how to navigate this brutal world. Right? No, I actually experience myself as part of the ground of being, and then I embrace, rejoice, and delight in my unique expression as being part of the ground of being. That is the birthright of every human being. See, the birthright of every human being is to know that they have a unique story. Their unique self is expressed in a unique story, a sacred autobiography. And that story deserves to be lived. That story deserves to be told. That story deserves to be received. And the realization that every human being is a unique self with a story to be lived, received, and told, a story that has infinite adequacy, infinite dignity, infinite worth and value, right? That is the core of the democratization of enlightenment. The democratization of enlightenment, of unique self-enlightenment, because that's the essence of what enlightenment is, right? The democratization of possibility that every human being can realize in their own first person that they participate in essence uniquely, and therefore be freed from the oppression of a raging ego, from the oppression of grasping, from the oppression of a felt sense of mortality, that my egoic personality structure will crash when I die. A person can actually transcend, right, that separate self experience and experience their unique infinity, right? And the joy that comes from, and the power that comes from, and the love that comes from participating in the all and letting it express in the only way that it can, uniquely through my unique gift. Let it create my unique obligation, right, to give that gift, right, in the cosmos, right? That is the obligation. It's the core spiritual obligation of every human being. Right? That's the cornerstone of a world spirituality. The cornerstone of a world spirituality is that while we draw from the great traditions, which are pre-modern, and all of their insight, and we draw from the modern traditions of psychology, right, of democracy itself. Right? Democracy is a modern tradition. It's part of modern gnosis. And we draw from the postmodern traditions that recognize evolution and the importance of context. That's all true. We draw from the best of pre-modern, modern, and postmodern in forming a world spirituality. And at the very core of that world spirituality is enlightenment, and particularly the democratization of enlightenment. Enlightenment, in its original core, is a pre-modern idea that exists in all the great traditions. Uniqueness, right, is a modern and postmodern idea. A modern idea in terms of the affirmation of the infinite dignity of the individual. A postmodern idea in terms of a realization that perspective, that every human being has a unique perspective. More than that, next step, democratization, democracy. Right? Democracy is a realization of enlightenment, of Western enlightenment. Right? It's the realization of a higher stage structure of consciousness. A higher structure of consciousness in which there's this realization across the board in culture that every human being has a right to participate in their own self-governance. Right? That is a momentous leap in the evolution of consciousness. And so what's happening is, right, as we develop a world spirituality based on this emergent evolutionary principle, this evolutionary emergent of the democratization of enlightenment, we recognize that what we're doing is we're bringing together in this very movement the best of pre-modern, modern, and postmodern. Right? Pre-modern wisdom traditions affirm enlightenment, the ability to move from small self to true self. Modern traditions affirm democracy. Right? And democracy is a higher stage of consciousness. Right? It's a higher level of consciousness. It's to grow up to a higher level of consciousness. So let's say before democracy and levels of consciousness, you might have an earlier level, which is about being part of a larger unit in which you're defined by that larger unit. It's being part of a mythic membership society. You're part of the church. You're part of the empire. Your value derives from you being part of the church, the empire of the religion, or the religion. That's one level of consciousness. Right? A higher level of consciousness is the emergence of democracy, in which you derive your value not from your place in the feudal empire, not from your place in the religion, although you clearly have that place, but your value is intrinsic. I have an obligation to love you, to affirm your dignity, to not reduce you to an object for someone else's subject, to a means for someone else's end, merely by the very virtue of your existence by itself. That's an evolution of consciousness. Democracy, which affirms, right, the individual, right, is an momentous leap in consciousness. So that's a contribution of modernity. So modernity says, grow up to your higher stage of consciousness, your higher level of consciousness. Pre-modernity says, wake up. Wake up and realize that you're not merely a separate self, you're a true self. And when wake up and grow up come together, then we can begin to show up as unique self. And unique self is the highest awakening of my state of consciousness. When I realize I'm part of the all, and then I awaken even higher, and I realize I'm a unique expression of the all, that's my highest awakening. My highest awakening of my highest state of consciousness actually is my unique self. The highest stage of consciousness, or the higher stage of consciousness that modernity invites us to, is to move from a mythic membership society to a democracy. Right? In a democracy, right, I have rights and I have dignity. And that dignity derives from my being unique, not from my being separate from the all, from my being unique, a unique self. And so the democratization of enlightenment says that every human being has the capacity to transcend their limited identity, their limited belief that they're a separate self, in which they need to grasp for resources, right, and to brutally oppress others, right, and to brutally oppress parts of myself in order to feel like I'm eternal. I can actually embrace all of who I am. I can actually embrace all of who you are. And together, we can actually move towards a higher level of being and consciousness. Wow. Okay? So that's amazing, right? The democratization of enlightenment, right? Every human being has the potential, right, to actually live this consciousness of enlightenment, of unique self-enlightenment. And because every human being has that possibility, that becomes the obligation, right, of every human being. So at the core of a world spirituality is the invitation, right? The invitation which appears for the first time today in the history of consciousness, right? To actually evolve, to evolve love. Because what is love? What does it mean to be love? Is to uniquely express love through my being. Love is both an emotion and a perception. It's a unique self-perception. I see you in your infinite dignity. Right? I see you in your true self. I see you as a unique expression of true self. And that's not only true for a small group of elite people living on a mountaintop in Nepal or in the back streets of Jerusalem, but actually the obligation to realize my unique self and to give my unique gifts in the world, right? To express and incarnate my unique being and becoming, that obligation, that possibility, right? That invitation is democratic. It's extended to every human being on the face of the planet, because only then can we create, right, a shift in consciousness which will allow us to thrive, right? To thrive as a people, to thrive as a civilization. The invitation to thrive only comes from the shift in consciousness, right, in which every human being is invited, right, to affirm the infinite dignity of their unique story that deserves to be told, lived, and received. Right? That is the democratization of enlightenment, which is the core of the evolution of consciousness, which is the evolution of love.